everyone. So, a couple years back, I've done a lot of top 10s. Like, back around 2019 to 2020, I did like millions of top 10s, and a lot of them were pretty weird ideas. Some I regret, others I'm okay with, but I'm starting to wonder if maybe some of them I should go ahead and remake. I know we all like to complain about remakes, but come on, if it's a remake to something that needs improvements, I think it's fine. So yeah, today I'm going to be remaking a video that I think I would like to share again. A top 10 list that I think you all should hear now. We all have those movies out there that we love, yet we know a lot of other people don't. We can have that shame. Sometimes the shame isn't too bad, because if it's a classic, you can get more people to agree with you. But if it's one of those newer films that you like but no one else does, it can be harder to get agreements. That's kind of the trend. Anyway, I do have a lot of movies out there that I really do like, but I know aren't really loved by many other people. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. But let's go ahead and talk about the ground rules. How this is going to work, because there can be a lot said about how depending it is on what movies out there are the ones that people like or the ones that people overall hate. So, guess what I'm going to be using? Guess what I'm going to be using based off of film ratings? Yeah, I'm using IMDb again. I know, I'm not going to stop using it. So yeah, IMDb has this rating course, and from what I can gather, any movie that's rated below a 6.0, like any movie that's rated from a 1.0 to a 5.9, those are the movies that are considered the weak ones. Those are the weak movies. The ones that are 6.0 over, those are the the loved ones, the ones that have a better fan base or whatever. So how this is going to work is I'm going to go by as many IMDb movies as I've rated that are rated something below 6.0, and just look at the ones that I have a positive opinion on and go from there. So like, this is my top 10 favorite movies of all time that have a rating of a 5.9 or lower. But to make it more simpler and easier to make sense, these are the top 10 movies that I enjoy, that I really love, but aren't really adored by many people. Now, you probably will see some movies on here that you like too. This is just going by what IMDb says, and even though other people wouldn't agree as much, that's just how I roll. So that's how it's going to work. So these are my top 10 favorite movies that are rated a 5.9 or lower on IMDb, or again, for shorter, just my top 10 favorite movies that I really like, but I know not a lot of other people do. Movies I like, but everyone else hates. That's the term. Let's go. This is Cocaine Bear, one of the more recent films you'll see on this list. Now, this movie has been interesting to talk about. It's a very weird kind of movie, and probably one of the weirdest aspects that we all love to talk about with this movie is how it just so happens to be based on a true story. Yeah, it's become a well-known fact that Cocaine Bear is such a silly, weird idea that just so happens to be a true story. A bear really did get cocaine. Of course, though, the whole CGI bear and, silly antics, a lot of that was sort of made up, but still, the overall idea seems too silly to believe, and yet it's true, and that's one of the biggest selling points of the movie, I believe. Still, honestly, I really don't think Cocaine Bear deserves to be hated that much. I mean, yeah, the idea is stupid. Yeah, it does overstay its welcome when you think about it, but I don't know. I found myself enjoying the concept over time. It's one of those things that can have a concept that many people would dislike for overstaying its welcome, but I never really saw that. I think the idea worked pretty well as it went going. The comedy was pretty fun, and I think the story did keep a nice course. I mean, it wasn't a perfect storytelling, but I did think it ran the course pretty well, and honestly, I think this movie does deserve a little more respect. It is a much more fun kind of film, and I do think the idea of finding such a ridiculous true story to make a movie out of is definitely one of the best kind of films to make. I feel like I should see more movies that are like that, if there are any like that. If not, then that's something that we can maybe do more. Find some ridiculous true stories and make a movie out of them. Here we have another recent movie. Yes, this is another one. It came out the same year. Blue Beetle was one of the DC movies that come out the last year of the DC Extended Universe. Yeah, we all remember what a fail this franchise was ever since it began. It seemed like all it wanted to do was keep up with the expansion, like with stuff like the Marvel Cinematic Universe. We all know how big and popular the MCU was, so DC wanted to try and make their own. Problem is, they rushed it. So after Man of Steel, we then instantly got Batman versus Superman, and from there, it seemed like it just wasn't working. As we got there were good movies. There was Wonder Woman. There was the Suicide Squad. There was all that. But then there was Suicide Squad. There was Justice League, and there was the Flash, which came out this year. Four DC movies came out this year, the same year that they were done. This was the year that the DC Extended Universe was ending, and they actually didn't even want to do anything to end it. They didn't want to end it on a big, exciting finale. No, they just released four movies from their lot to come out. There was a sequel to Shazam, which wasn't really anything great. There was The Flash, which of course was awful. There was the Aquaman sequel, which turned out to be the final film in the entire franchise, and yet it didn't really do anything. It just was a sequel to Aquaman. But then there was Blue Beetle, which honestly I think was the best one because mostly because it is a new kind of film. This is a new superhero. I didn't have much hope for when I first saw the idea. I mean, what's so special? Well, when I saw the movie, I do think it did its job pretty nicely. It did still have its silly moments. Some of it's not as exciting moments that, of course, was a trend with this franchise. But overall, I did still really like what it went for because, a new superhero, it's fun to see what new stuff it can do. I do like sort of the new things that we get to come across with this new hero. It's a beetle that's blue, but a human. And we do see it in action. We do see a lot. They do a lot with it. It's sad though that this obviously is going to be the last time I'll see this beetle, since after this, they didn't do anything more of it. The franchise is done. I guess we'll have to see what will come of it when we get to the new version of the DC franchise. But for now, this is just the only case of Blue Beetle we got. But in all due respect, it is a nice case. Now here we have a B movie. B movies are debatable whether you want to praise them entirely for being so silly yet fun, or you want to hate it because it's so bad it's good. Piranha is one of those cases where I see it as sort of the good side of it. Now, my thought of a movie being so bad it's good, I think it is still nice to praise a movie for being that, if that's the intention. Like, if it is a B movie. If it was intended to be, bad, if they didn't want, if you can definitely see that they weren't trying to make it so serious, if it is meant to be a silly kind of horror film, then I think it's nice to give it a praise for being so bad it's good. It's not one of those films like Birdemic where you can see they really wanted to try and make something. So that's when that's just overall terrible movie, yet still laughable. But this, we all know they tried to make this movie as weird as it was. This came out during the whole Jaws phase where everyone wanted to make a be afraid to go in the water type of movie. And this one kind of does its job in different routes, because for one, it is a silly B movie and it does embrace that sometimes. But at the same time, I will admit, I did sort of get a little freak with it. I mean, piranhas are pretty creepy. They're little fish that have big teeth and they can do a lot of damage to you. So, I don't know. I think this kind of story seems like it could be just as scary as Jaws, if not maybe even scarier. Obviously, that wasn't the case. It is a B movie, but it's still a pretty enjoyable one because when it wants to be silly, it does its job great. When it wants to be scary, it actually does its job pretty nicely. I do like, seeing what they can do with piranhas. You got these weird creatures that are, will bite off of anybody. It's basically Jaws, but little fish, and they are creepy. So yeah, you know what? I give this movie a proper praise. It's not a I hate it so much, but I love it kind of praise. No, it's an honest praise. Because yeah, if the movie is meant to be silly, then I think it deserves an honest praise. Oh, look at and proper horror movie. I Know What You Did Last Summer is pretty popular, and it does have a pretty nice plot. The idea and concept is pretty creative. These teens hit somebody with their car, throw the body in the river, then a year later get threatened by some dude who knows about the situation and will pretty much scare them or even kill them in the case. It's, there's a lot of fun to it. However, the way it's executed is where this movie's hatred comes from. The kind of the way the twist is handled, the way the whole plot runs. That's kind of where the movie's criticisms come from, which honestly I agree with. Because yeah, a lot of the stuff people complain about, I'm kind of with. I get it. Yeah, yeah. The twist was done a little rough, and I do think the stuff we get in the plot is not as enjoyable. But this is one of those cases where I agree with the problems people have, yet they don't bother me as much as it bothers them. Because yeah, I know these are problems, but they're not huge problems. They're not problems that would make this movie as bad to me as it does to them. I still enjoy the movie. I still think the whole concept and what we get with it, it does do its job. You will get what the plot offers. If you want a plot about people hitting somebody, dumping their body, and getting traumatized by someone, you will get it. It does have those bland moments of story execution or whatever, but they don't bother me as much as they bother others. They're still it still is a nicely handled film. It's obviously not as fun as something like, say, Scream, but I still think it's worth watching if you're into new horror concepts. Okay, now, this is one of those movies that a lot of people do like looking back at it, a positive vibe. Mostly because, yeah, this is definitely not something you would see today. It's White Chicks is like, even the title is just, yeah, you're not going to get a movie like this made in a new society. But, man, the fact that it exists is honestly, quite frankly, really nice. This is obviously as ridiculous of a 2000s comedy as you can get. It's two FBI agents who disguise themselves as white chicks, and from there, yeah, that's where the comedy comes from. You got these design. It's great. I'm sorry, it's not one of the best comedies of all time, but my god, the ridiculousness and the idea and is just so fun. And you know what? They really handle a lot of its comedy in this movie really well. Okay, it's not all great. Yes, there are those moments that just make you face palm hard, but honestly, there's only very few of them. You will do a lot of face palming, but most of it will be in a fun way. Like most of the palming you'll do in the from the movie is the kind that you can work with. The kind that you're just like, I love this because yeah, that's what this is. It's like a ridiculous comedy with a fun aspect. It's because these two are all over the place with this disguises, and a lot of the things you get, like Terry Crews, for example, his role in this movie is one of the most famous parts about it, and yeah, he's just as funny as these two are. So yeah, this is a comedy that has a lower rating on IMDb, probably because of how stupid it is, but to most people nowadays, it's a fun kind of stupid. Most of us will just love this movie because we really would love to enjoy the kind of stuff that we know will just not get made anymore. But we just love the fact that something like this does exist. All right, now here's a comedy that does still have its mixed reactions. 1941 is a spoof, sort of a spoof on World War II, and sort of does a lot of lampooning on the whole over the top violence that you can imagine from this war. And pairing up with sort of these weird SNL stars, Dan Aykroyd, John Belushi, John Candy, and so on. And the fact that this was directed by Steven Spielberg. Yes, believe it or not, a man who gave us Jaws, Close Encounters, and would go on to give us E.T., Indiana Jones, Schindler's List. He made this movie. This is definitely not something you would imagine director making, and that's kind of one of the reasons this movie falls under the radar. I really like it though. I mean, I guess I'm kind of a nerd when it comes to comedies, but I think that it's really funny. Yes, this movie has its funny moments. I know they're not the kind you would want someone like Spielberg to make, but once in a while these directors do have to come up with something that usually isn't part of their main goal. So seeing Spielberg step out of his comfort zone for a little bit to do this movie, he does do it really nicely because this movie is really fun. The comedy is nice. It actually does a good job of its over the topness. There's a lot of violence, destruction involved, and it's all pretty fun to watch. So overall, yeah, this movie is fun. I know it's not the kind. I know it's very problematic for being a story that Spielberg makes, but I don't know. I feel like that's kind of a dumb thing to hate this movie on. I mean, maybe there is something else to it that people hate that I'm not getting, but I don't know. I just think this movie is still a lot of fun. I think maybe, while it is nice to see Spielberg make more dramatic and fun kind of epics nowadays and not just branch out to this, this is a once in a lifetime film that he makes. And for what it's worth, it still is a lot of fun to watch. And here we have another ridiculous comedy that definitely has a higher fan base now. But Nutty Professor is actually kind of more one of those films that I was being very picky about when I first watched it. I remember I first watched it, I was like, man, what is this? What am I supposed to get to this? But when I realized there's something to it that really is fun to see, it's Eddie Murphy. Eddie Murphy is one of those comic legends that everyone likes to praise, and he definitely shines in this movie. I think one of the best elements we can get from this guy is how many characters he can play. His main role is the fat professor who in this movie is the story of him creating a potion that would turn him into a skinny, handsome man. And yeah, of course, it's just fat Eddie Murphy transforming into a regular Eddie Murphy with muscles. But along with that, there's of course his entire family in this movie, who, as we all know, are all played by Eddie Murphy. And yeah, ever since I learned that fact, yeah, this is funny. It's funny I didn't recognize that at first, but ever since I learned about that, I had to look back at this movie and realize, man, this really is comic genius. It's not one of the best '90s comedies of all time, but it is still a very fun one. The concept is fun, despite this actually being a remake. That's another thing I didn't know at first, but still, it's such a enjoyable kind of film. It's goofy, it's silly. It's basically it has a similar reasoning for its rating as White Chicks does, but we all still can enjoy it. We all still love its silliness. This is not meant to be made for those critics out there. Critics are meant to take every movie they watch seriously. I don't. I'll love a movie that I don't have to take seriously. That's what I do with this. I just will not mind what I watch. I know we all love to take movies seriously all the time, but maybe I don't want to do that all the time. Maybe I just want to take the moment to watch something that I don't have to do anything but laugh to. And that's where this comes in. Yeah, it has its serious moments, but it's a comedy and it's fun. Now, Volcano, I this is another film that I definitely can understand its criticisms for. It's a volcano near a city. When it erupts, it causes a big lava flood towards the city, creating mass destruction. I know that's such a stupid idea that many people love to mock, but you know what? I don't care. I actually really found investment in the idea. I know it's weird for me to say that, but man, I just couldn't find myself to really get too much hate out of this movie. I think the idea of a volcano destroying a city in such a dramatic way is fun to watch. Okay, maybe I shouldn't say it like that. I don't mean like I love watching volcanoes destroy cities. I'm not saying like that, but in terms of disaster films, those are fun to watch because disaster movies are always doing the worst, trying to show the worst of outcome there can be. And this movie does a pretty fun job at showing it in this way. Yeah, it does kind of get stupid at times with how the science is, but look, I'm not a scientist, okay? I'm not gonna hate this movie because it's doing false information that I can't dispute, okay? I'm not gonna I hate this movie because it's scientifically inaccurate when I can't really prove much of it. So I'll just enjoy what it's giving me. I'm not watching these movies to take educational lessons. Like I didn't go to my science class the next day and be like, uh, according to the movie Volcano, I just saw what the movie was doing and went with it. And I feel like, once in a while I'm able to do that and work fine with it. I'm not a big buff for science. I mean, I love science fiction, but I'm just there to see what the movie tries to throw its way. Okay, maybe that's just what it is. Maybe this is just one of those films that people couldn't enjoy because it was being scientifically inaccurate. Again, maybe I'm thinking of the wrong thing, but that's kind of the only thing I could find to this movie that I would understand people hating it for. Maybe there's something else, but to me, that's all I can recognize, and that really isn't much of a problem. It's still a really good movie. Okay, where can I begin with this? Return of the Killer Tomatoes. Now, this actually has fallen under the radar. Unlike White Chicks or Professor, where there's a great big happy fan base we can get, not a lot of people recall with this movie. It's not really well known. And there's a reason for it. Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, the first movie was a B movie spoof, and it was silly, but a fun kind of silly. It was still very fun. It wasn't great, but I think it was still a nice little weird B movie comedy that's definitely not many people remember, but the people who do remember it can at least have some positivity towards what it was doing. Return of the Killer Tomatoes is even less known. It's a sequel that, to me, works better because it's hilarious and it's a lot funnier in certain ways. The tomatoes are less annoying. I know it's weird to call it that, but yeah, in the first movie, these tomatoes could speak and they were pretty annoying. That was kind of my biggest problem with the movie. In the sequel, they're not really like that. They're less annoying, and this time we get a weird plot that is executed in so many silly ways. Like, for one, we have a young George Clooney in the role, and this time he's actually doing a fine job at acting. I know. Crazy for me to think that. But yeah, George Clooney can act in this movie, funny enough. But then there's, of course, a bunch of other stars, and we get all sorts of randomness. We get the plot, but then we also get these random cut bits where it's like what you're watching is not supposed to be taken seriously. We're making this movie. We're trying our hardest to make money off of stuff that we clearly can't afford much more of. And I like how the movie can embrace that. It's one of those films that embraces and acknowledges how little of a budget they have and how little of a production they can do. And so we get this kind of sequel that is really, really fun sequel. If you know about the Killer Tomatoes things, if you want to watch the movies, I would recommend going with this one. This is the one that I think really does embrace how stupid and out there it is. The first movie does well, but this one, I think it works a little bit better. It's still not a spectacular comedy, but in terms of the whole Killer Tomatoes idea, I think that idea could not have been done any better than how it was in this movie. All right, so finishing off, this is a serious film, for the most part at least. The remake of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Yes, ladies and gentlemen, I am defending a remake. God help me, what is wrong with me? What have I become? What am I doing to this world? But you know what? I'm cool with it. Because, like I said earlier, remakes are necessary if the originals do need improvements. And I'm not saying the first Nightmare on Elm Street movie is incredibly problematic. It's a great movie, but there are still some things I do feel could work better if we saw it in a new light. As great of a movie as it is, as popular as it is, a remake to A Nightmare on Elm Street is definitely understandable, especially seeing how many ridiculous sequels this character has gotten over the years. I mean, his legacy has just been completely satirized from how many silly sequels he's gotten. I mean, I feel like the world just needs to see him as a serious kind of thing again. So I think that's kind of what this movie's for. It's to try and make Freddy Krueger as serious of a baddie as he used to be, and not advantage to his comedic ways. Now, so yeah, that's what we have for this movie. We have a serious Freddy Krueger and a serious new adventure that got a lot of hate. Honestly, I don't see it. Yeah, I'm sorry. I really enjoyed this remake. I do not think it's better than the first movie, but I do think it's a really nice, fun remake to watch. Because Freddy Krueger is actually kind of intimidating in this movie, if I'm being honest. And I really do think that the story is handled really well. I think that the whole idea of dying in dreams, having these crazy effects happen to you while you're sleeping. I think this movie handles it pretty nicely in a pretty fun way. I mean, I don't know. Is it just because it's the remake and we didn't want that? Is it because it's got such a ridiculous group? Is it because the idea is just too stupid to take seriously nowadays? I don't know. Honestly, I don't see it. I just really think that this remake works really nicely. It's got a pretty great amount of singers. There's even some moments I would argue work a little bit more better than the original. Overall, the original is better, of course, but still, I found myself really enjoying this remake, despite all the backlash it gets. I think out of horror, as far as horror movie remakes go, this is one that I think deserves to be appreciated more because not a lot of horror remakes can work. But the ones that do work are worth watching. And in my opinion, this is one of those examples.